Hello, everyone. If folks can start to get settled, we'll begin just in a few minutes, so it would be helpful if people could get to their seats. Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin in just a few minutes. Really grateful to see you all here this evening. My name is Kyle Christofalo, and I serve as the Senior Director of Advocacy and Government Relations at Churches for Middle East Peace, and we're really grateful for all of the organizations that have come together this evening to host Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac. So just a few announcements before we start. So this church is busy tonight. If you think you're in a lecture on Christian nationalism, that is downstairs. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that that event is happening as well. And so as a result, we'll hear in just a few minutes from the senior pastor of this church, of which I'm a member, but she'll also have to be going back and forth to those events because we are a downtown church, and so we use our space to welcome many different people throughout the week. The other brief announcement is just on bathrooms. All of the bathrooms that you can use are on this floor. So if you go through those doors, there are 2 individual stalls that you'll see right on that side. And then there is 1 individual stall through these doors as well through the senior pastor's office area. So again, really grateful for all of you being here and for coming out on this evening to hear Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac. So we want to give the opportunity for Reverend Dr. Sarah Johnson, who is the senior pastor of New York Avenue Presbyterian Church, to offer some welcome and open us with prayer. Reverend Dr. Johnson has been the senior pastor here for about 3-4 years now, probably, right? Yeah, wow. And we're really grateful, again, for New York Avenue's generosity in opening up this space and for the events that you host and the ministries of this church. So, Reverend Dr. Johnson.
Kyle, thank you so much for that warm introduction. Friends, good evening. Welcome to New York Avenue Presbyterian Church. I am indeed Reverend Sarah Johnson. I'm the senior pastor here at New York Avenue. And it is a privilege to welcome you tonight to the church. Whether you have been here each week, whether you have been here many times, or maybe if this is the first time that you are visiting in our building, we're so very glad you are here. We want you to know that this congregation is an inclusive community of faith that stands at the heart of our nation's capital. We engage in God's transforming work of challenging the powerful, of standing with the oppressed, of lifting up the brokenhearted, and making God's love and God's justice visible to all. Which is a fancy way of saying that we are a place that doesn't take labels and titles very seriously. It doesn't really matter to us what job title or what label you bring into the building. What matters to us is who you really are, because we think that who you really are also matters to God. We strive each week and each day as we welcome folks into our building, however imperfectly, to create a place of authentic warmth and a place of belonging, no matter the beliefs you carry or the doubts that you know. Which also means that we hope wherever you are in your journey of life, or as a person of faith or no faith at all, that you feel at home here. And that in some small way you know or experience the love and grace of God, who is in the end all of our homes. I wouldn't be a preacher or a pastor if I didn't extend an invitation for you to engage more deeply with this community of faith, whether that is through one of our speaker events, through coming here to participate in a lecture, or also in our tutoring program, to serve on Sunday mornings, or to join us in worship. We are here every single day and every Sunday at 10 a.m., whether you are passing through the district as a visitor or whether you are looking for a spiritual home. Come and join us. There is a seat saved just for you. These are challenging times. And so as we gather to listen and to learn, let me open us with a word of prayer. Let us pray. Our God, our help in ages past, our hope for years to come. We are grateful this night for the opportunity to gather and for the opportunity to seek and to listen on the path of faith, seeking understanding. So startle us, O God, with your truth. Challenge us with new insights and fresh perspectives that broaden and inspire our understanding of you, and grant us the courage for the living of these days.
Reverend Sarah. So we're really honored that several groups have co-sponsored this event alongside us. You'll hear from some of them throughout the evening, including Telos and Christians for Social Action. The ELCA is also a sponsoring group, so we're very grateful for all of the groups that have come alongside us to make this evening possible. I'd like to introduce a leader associated with one of those groups now to offer a few remarks and then introduce our primary speaker for this evening. So we're really grateful for Nikki Tiamosito, who is the Executive Director of Christians for Social Action. In this role, Nikki helps Christians have a faith-fueled engagement with the world's most challenging issues. And we know that this issue is, I'm sure, near the top of that list. Before coming to Christians for Social Action, she served in leadership positions of multiple organizations, including International Justice Mission, the Urbana Conference, and InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. So we're really grateful. Nikki, please.
I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac. He's a Palestinian Christian pastor, a pastor of the Lutheran Church, and he's a dean at the Bethlehem Bible College, where he directs Christ at the Checkpoint. It was there at Christ at the Checkpoint that the Reverend Dr. Isaac has become a long friend of Christians for Social Action, formerly known as Evangelicals for Social Action, and our leader, Ron Sider. The Reverend Dr. Isaac speaks and bears witness to a gospel that seeks peace with justice. And his prophetic call to remember God's invitation to peacemaking continues to be a prophetic call that makes those in power deeply uncomfortable and stirs the imagination of others. Tonight, we will hear from him as he shares from his most recent book, Christ in the Rubble, Faith, the Bible, and Genocide in Gaza. Would you join me in welcoming Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac?
Thank you, please. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for inviting me to talk about not just my book, my people, the whole situation. It's a book I wish I did not have to write, and I truly wish I was here in different circumstances. It's been so taxing, so hard, so difficult, so emotionally taxing, spiritually taxing for us to talk about this topic month after month, day after day, week after week, as we continue to plead, it seems not just for the war to stop, but also for the world to recognize the humanity of our people. The book, the talk is difficult. To talk about faith, Bible, genocide, as I said, is difficult. And as you would tell, I will speak with so much, like most Palestinians today, with anger, pain, and frustration, because we're tired of the images, of the stories, of sharing, of advocating. And we're tired of continuing to say, look at the images of children in hospitals, children pulled from under the rubble, which continues to happen even as we speak. But we cannot stop. And we need to acknowledge that what's really happening in Gaza is not just that there is a genocide. What's even worse is that this genocide is being denied. I was troubled when I said that the genocide is being normalized. Now I say it's being denied. When we call it a genocide, it's not as if I invented the term or Palestinians invented the term. And that's what really makes us angry, is the fact that it was international conventions and human rights conventions, and in fact the Western world lectured us for years about these definitions and about the importance of terminologies and why human rights matter and why the international law matter. And then when we apply these terminologies, these definitions, these criteria on what Israel is doing, an ally of the Western world, all of a sudden we are assaulted and we cannot use the G word as it was described. I wish I'd had the time to list the number of organizations and experts and professors and reports and studies that use these international definitions, the Geneva Convention definition, to describe what Israel has done as apartheid, as genocide. The list is comprehensive. So let us be clear. The question is not whether it's a genocide or not. The question is, why is this genocide being denied? This is the real question we need to ask. And for me as a person of faith, as a pastor, I must ask, why is the church not calling it a genocide? Denying that it is a genocide is an assault on our humanity as Palestinians, but I would say it's more than that. It's an assault on our collective humanity. We said never again, and now never again has become yet again. And it is being denied. And we have to ask, how many more need to be killed until the world acknowledges and says enough is enough? And the horrifying part is that the numbers we are sharing, our fear is confirmed that they're not true. We've been talking about 50,000 killed, including 17,000 children. And now the recent studies, there was one by The Lancet, one of the world's leading medical journals, that estimated the death toll to be more than 180,000. How many more need to be killed? Nothing more to be destroyed. They destroyed everything. 2 million displaced. Just now they casually said, we will annex parts, we will take parts of Gaza, just as they will take parts of the West Bank. And by the way, I even feel ashamed to mention what's happening in the West Bank. Do you know that more than 40,000 people are already displaced in the West Bank? They destroyed the refugee camp in Jenin. Today they assaulted the refugee camp in Bethlehem, Dohesha refugee camp, and we fear they will do the same. They began putting marks on homes, even spreading posters with what they've done on Jenin to tell the people of Dohesha, we will do the same. It's clear that the seeds of ethnic cleansing are already being destroyed in Bethlehem. And so it's not just that one is enough. When will we take a courageous step as people of faith? I wrote this book to call out the church, the people of faith from different traditions, but mainly my community, the Christian community, for their complicity in this war. And part of what I have argued is that theology was part and parcel of a matrix of three that enabled this genocide. And we will be fooled to think that religion is separated from colonialism and racism. To me, the three worked hand in hand in what happened in Gaza. We need to acknowledge the rooted racism in the Western world, the rooted coloniality that enabled this war, and then the theology and religion behind it. To the United States and to many other European countries, Israel is an ally. It serves their best interest. When we talk about coloniality, I define it using the Accra Confession, an ecumenical document that says it's the coming together. This is what empires are, coming together of economical, cultural, political, and military power that constitutes a system of domination led by powerful nations to protect and defend their own interests. These are the key words here: power, domination, interest. So in this matrix, the United States always says Israel is our ally. In fact, Biden said if Israel did not exist, we would have to create it to protect our interests in the Middle East. At least he's honest. Don't tell me this is about fairness or about morality or ethic. This is about what's the best for interest of the superpowers, making the superpowers more powerful and richer. And to dominate, you exploit others. And when you do so, this is clearly based on racism. Again, I wish we could unpack this rooted racism that still exists in our world today. The belief that some people groups have less dignity and worth than others, to put it simply. When someone boasts that he will own someone else's territory, as Trump boasted that he will own Gaza, and then make it into the Riviera of the Middle East by ethnically cleansing 2 million people, you only declare such a thing when you clearly view yourself as superior and entitled and the others as inferior, even less human. How else would you explain this? And what was fascinating is the response of government officials in the United States. They debated the practicality of the idea. They wondered if we need to send troops to Gaza. No one talked or cared about the fact that what was suggested is the displacement of 2 million Palestinians, or the fact that what was suggested is actually ethnic cleansing, a crime. So it's not just that you view others as inferior, but then you view yourself as above any law, openly boasting that you can own someone else's land. Can we afford to be silent? And let me be clear, no one can own us. We're free from the inside. Now, if you need a theology, ideology, religion that turns coloniality and racism into good and righteous acts, again, this is where religion comes to service. Empires always rely on religion. They need religion to give legitimacy to the sins of coloniality and racism by giving them different names to look and appear righteous. To dominate, you must dehumanize, and to dehumanize, you need a discourse that turns the indigenous into terrorists, acts of colonialism into fighting evil and tyranny, promoting democracy, values, freedom, law and order, or self-defense. You need a religion to shift the discourse. You need those who whisper in the ears of Caesar that he is sent from God, and what he is doing is not just right, but will actually make us all great again. Empires need religion. They need a discourse that declares that you are entitled, chosen, destined, and superior. Go and read the theology of apartheid. Go and read the theology of Christian Zionism. And go and read the nation-state law, which is a manifestation of supremacy in the name of God and religion. And in the case of Palestine, the relationship between colonialism and theology is well documented. I don't need to speak about it. How acts of colonialism was described as Jews returning to their land, rendering us as indigenous Palestinians, including the Palestinian Christians who kept and preserved the Christian heritage for thousands of years, rendering us as aliens, even invaders. This is the power of the theological discourse that we need to reckon with. It's one thing to say there is historical and religious roots to the land for the Jewish people. Yes. It's completely another to use that as a justification for displacing others and taking their land and establishing a system of apartheid, which is what's happening. And unfortunately, in this war, we've seen how this Western theological and church support to Israel went to a new level. It was horrifying. It was hard to fathom. Even writing about it was so difficult. As I wrote about in this book, The Theology of a Genocide. It was a chapter that could have been a whole book. I had to select what Christians said about this war and how many of them supported. Not all, I know, but many. And their positions were so loud, so horrifying. It was across different levels. Theologians, pastors, Christian media, congresspeople, politicians, they used the Bible in this political discourse to justify a genocide. And one of the most telling moments was when Congressman Allen asked the president of Columbia University in a Congress hearing about the university encampments if she knows Genesis 12:3. I kid you not, this is in a Congress. And then asked her, do you want Columbia University to be cursed by the God of the Bible? Can you imagine? A friend of mine called this theological terrorism, intimidation, fear. Weaponizing scripture to intimidate, and to send fear. And the fact that they don't see the utmost hypocrisy in what they're saying. Always lecturing us on the separation of state and church and all of that. And then they bring it to support Israel. And just to highlight the hypocrisy, imagine if Muslim Congresswoman Ilhan Omar did the same, quoting the Quran to threaten and intimidate that Allah will curse you if you are against Palestine. Imagine if she's done so. Imagine the coverage of Fox News that day. We were horrified throughout this war to listen to pastors calling for the total destruction of Gaza. We were horrified when we were described as Palestinians as possessing the spirit of Amalek. We were called the Amalekites. Netanyahu did it, but many Christian pastors did it. And for those who don't know, in the Bible, if you possess the spirit of Amalek, you must be utterly destroyed. And we were described as possessing the spirit of Amalek, and I kid you not, for not accepting Israel's sole inheritance of the land today. In other words, if you don't accept that the land belongs exclusively to the land, to Israel and the Jews, that means you must be utterly destroyed, annihilated. Imagine. A congressman who used to be a pastor, and this is what shocks me, honestly, said, his name is Waltberg, said that bombs should be dropped on Gaza like Nagasaki and Hiroshima so that we get it over with quick. Adding that we shouldn't be spending a dime on humanitarian aid. I mean, what Jesus is he following? What Jesus is he reading? I always say in Palestine, Christianity and non-violence is one package. You can't be other way. You can't be Christian. But the obsession here with violence shocks us. Coming from the mouth of pastors and preachers, citing Nagasaki and Hiroshima as good examples shocks me. Remember when we killed 200,000 people? That worked. Let's do it again. Really? And these are followers of Jesus in position of power. The just war theory was used. To us, the just war theory is yet one tool in the arsenal of empire to justify colonialism and expansion, making it a just and righteous act. And in the case of Gaza, it makes the killing, the massacre of 17,000 children, the justice of God. I cannot accept this. We cannot accept this, that this is the justice of God. Some churches until today have not called for a ceasefire. And many churches made numerous statements that can be characterized by condemning one side with the strongest language, yet never condemning the other side. In the book, I went through one statement after the other. The actions of the Palestinians are always condemned, described as indiscriminate, brutal, ruthless, as in one document. Adopts the Zionist narrative that this is all in self-defense and so on. But when Israel's actions are described, they are never condemned. War crimes are never called out. In one document, what's happening in Gaza was described as, and I quote, a human tragedy. You see, it could have been an earthquake or a hurricane that caused this, quote, human tragedy. They can never bring themselves to condemn any action by the state of Israel. And I can never understand that. Because you have condemned Palestinians with the strongest language. At least be consistent. Are we less human? That's why we've been asking this. And unfortunately, many church statements that called for a ceasefire not only lack the urgency, but the tools. The language of war crimes, genocide, apartheid, and holding those who commit war crimes accountable was missing from these documents. This is the diplomatic church. The church that preaches peacemaking as neutrality. We position ourselves in the middle. We are righteous than everyone. We don't take sides. We pray for both sides equally, never calling things by name. Because of that, I say today, and I ask in full honesty, can you really claim to be in solidarity with Palestinians if you are not willing to call things for what they are? It should not be controversial to name Israeli actions as apartheid. And again, the utmost hypocrisy that in this country people obsessed about the slogan in the streets. It's only a slogan, from the river to the sea, while ignoring the reports, for example, like B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, that talks about a system, and I quote, believe me, this is the title, Jewish supremacy from the river to the sea, a system of apartheid. They're more concerned about the slogan than the reality of apartheid in Palestine, and still do not want to talk about apartheid. It's not helpful, we're told. It buries bridges. By church leaders. Why do we emphasize terminology? They tell me. I always say, imagine going to South Africa in the 80s and talking about the black and white conflict. Telling the black church, we cannot talk about apartheid, it burns bridges. Let's talk about reconciliation between the black and the white. This is what the church is engaged in today, by refusing to acknowledge the reality in Palestine as settler colonialism, as apartheid, and more importantly, what's happening today as a genocide. We must call it for what it is so that we hold those who commit war crimes accountable. Or else, what future do we want to leave our children? If it is a future in which people commit war crimes, then are celebrated and welcome in the Congress. Can we be silent? It's much more than Palestine, believe me. And it's time to be courageous and confront racism for what it is, confront exclusive ideologies, and call things by name. It's time to confront Zionism for what it is. And I'm very grateful to see many Jewish people rising up today and saying Zionism is not compatible with our Jewish ethos. When I listen and read to what some groups like Jewish Voice for Peace describe on Zionism, I say, I wish my fellow Christian leaders use the same language. Recognize Zionism for what it is. Yet unfortunately, we still want to come across as neutral, soft. Let's engage in a time, let's have a conversation in a time in which people are being slaughtered. It is time to act and call things for what they are. Having said all of that, I must recognize and acknowledge the many, many prophetic voices within the church. Yes, I've been harsh on the church, but that does not mean many did not speak up. And I must begin by acknowledging the role of the church in South Africa. They stood with us. They accompanied us. Many of you know me from the sermon, Christ in the Rubble, during Christmas. 2 months into the genocide, there was a group of 20 church leaders from around the world. 13 of them were from South Africa. Some of them decided not to preach in South Africa that on Christmas Eve and to spend Christmas with Palestinians when we said we're canceling Christmas celebrations. That is solidarity. I was just at the vigil in front of the White House. How many vigils took place? How many demonstrations? How many pilgrimages? How many marches? We saw you, we heard you, and we acknowledge every act of solidarity that happened in every city that around the world. And I'm grateful for those who were driven by their discipleship as followers of Jesus, who understood the concept of costly solidarity. Friends, solidarity by definition is costly. And we have to acknowledge this today. Maybe never than ever, today, solidarity by definition is costly. And let's remember that this is, as I said, about our collective humanity. I would like to address the concept of Christ in the Rubble. An image seen around the world, yet many know that it actually began as a pastoral step, as a pastoral gesture. The inception of the concept of Christ in the Rubble began the day of the attack on St. Porphyrios. 18 people were killed, including 9 precious children. It was hard. How do we respond? It was hard on me because I had just finished a prayer, leading a prayer with fellow clergy in Bethlehem praying for a ceasefire, praying for protection. We went home and heard about the attack. I couldn't help but wonder, does God care? Does he listen? Why didn't he protect? What made it harder is that one of the church members I pastor lost her sister in the attack. So what do you say in times like this? What do you preach about? All I could think of is point to the cross and say that when we look at the cross, we see Jesus as the victim of violence. In fact, he is the victim of the very same violence of the empire. He too on the cross cried, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He understands pain. He understands suffering. He is close to us. God is under the rubble in Gaza. He is close to those who suffer. He identifies with us in our pain and suffering. He is in solidarity with the oppressed. I said, God is in the operation room. He's in the hospital. This is where we encounter God, with those who suffered. He's under the rubble in Gaza. I was honestly trying to bring God near to those who suffer and bring a message of comfort and peace in the midst of severe pain. I was trying to bring comfort. And so Christmas came, and I shared with our church members in the Bible study, let's have this manger of Jesus in the midst of rubble. We created it. We met as several families. I'll never forget the day. It was so emotional. Some of us were in tears. We brought children with us who helped us put it together because we wanted to teach them to think and empathize with others, to fight this culture of numbness that we live in. And I said next Sunday in church that this manger of Christ in the rubble is the true meaning of Christmas. It's about the solidarity of God with the marginalized and the oppressed. For let us remember that Jesus was born in the midst of occupation. And he was born among the occupied. When he was born, he survived a massacre. The family escaped by becoming refugees out of all places in Egypt, the same place Palestinians in Gaza try to escape to today. We read that story, and we see Jesus empathizing in solidarity with us in our story, in our pain, and in our suffering. Which led me to say that if Jesus were to be born today, he would be born in Gaza under the rubble as a sign of solidarity with the marginalized and the oppressed. This is again the true meaning of Christmas, the incarnation, Emmanuel, God with us in our pain and suffering. He's with us amidst the occupation. But I also added that in a time when the world seemed to be content and continues, even today, rationalize and justify the killing of our children, I said we see the image of Jesus in every child pulled from under the rubble. The world might say whatever they want about our children. We know how God views them. This is our faith and this is our commitment to see Jesus in every victim of oppression. We see him in every child pulled from under the rubble. And it was Jesus who said, whatever you have done to the least of these, you have done to me. This is the solidarity of God with the marginalized and oppressed. And to me, this is a call to each one of us, that the solidarity of God must be our solidarity. We too must be in solidarity with the marginalized and the oppressed. That's why I always say this is truly about the credibility, and I'm not exaggerating, of our Christian witness. When a genocide is denied and normalized, and we're watching it live, what we say and do in that moment says a lot about our witness, our values, our faith, our belief. It's about the credibility of our witness. And as I said, the silence of many was too loud because it communicated apathy. It did not reflect the heart of God towards the broken and the suffering. Never again has become yet again. And when people continue to ask me and reach out with pain and anger, where is God? Why does he allow this? and I understand the frustration and anger in this question, I continue to insist that this is not the question we must ask. Rather, we shouldn't say where was God, but where were the people of goodwill? Where were the people of faith? And I will continue to ask, where was the church? What did we do? What did we say so that never again truly becomes never again? And with the attention the Christ in the Rubble image received, I received a platform. It was overwhelming. With it, I understood too well that there is a responsibility to speak. We need to be vocal. We cannot be timid and calm. We have to speak with this righteous anger. Again, I insist, it's about the credibility of our Christian witness. Gaza has indeed become the moral compass of our world. What did we do? What did we say? Again, I repeat, what did we do or say so that never again becomes never again? This is a question for each and every one of us. And I would like to conclude by daring myself, challenging myself, and challenging each one of us to continue to hope. Believe me, it's a struggle. Believe me, I struggle to even bring the word or concept or preach about it today. I speak more about survival. I hope we survive. I hope we survive this very, very dark moment of our history. Those who are drowning can only wish that they survive. But in the midst of all of this, we cannot surrender, we cannot give in. Can we really dare to help? And should we preach hope in the midst of a genocide? How can we talk about hope when thousands have lost their lives, when millions are displaced? And how can we talk about hope with the annexation and ethnic cleansing in the West Bank and the rise of settler attack? How can we talk about hope when the person who led the Gaza genocide and one of the architects of an apartheid reality is actually received and welcomed in Congress as a hero? How can we hope when Arab leaders watch and do nothing to stop this bloodshed? How can we hope when ideologies of supremacy and exclusion dominate our world? And how can we hope when many churches side with the empire, repeat its rhetoric, play its tune, all while claiming that they are on the side of peace? How can we hope when the Bible continues to be weaponized against Palestinians and other peoples? How can we hope when the Caesars of today boast about owning someone else's land, displacing millions, turning the tragedy of millions into opportunity to grow in wealth and power, even sharing a video of the plan, and I kid you not if you've seen it, featuring a golden statue of himself? While many in the community of faith not just keep silent, others, even worse, continue whispering in his ears, "You are sent by God." How can we hope in the midst of the culture of fear and intimidation? We cannot stop hoping. We cannot stop believing. Because if we do so, and if we stop praying, we declare that we give in to tyranny and oppression, allowing the oppressors of the empire of today not just to shape our reality and present, but also our future. So we cannot stop and give in and accept injustice as the norm. And I refuse to accept that injustice is the norm. Hope in this sense becomes a struggle, resilience, even resistance. It's painful, it's illogical, it even feels wrong at times. But we cannot surrender to the alternative. In Palestine, we talk about sumud. Sumud is the Arabic word for steadfastness, for resilience. Sumud, hope, and faith come hand in hand. Because it's about refusing to give in, to forget. It's about rootedness in the land that can be shaken but never uprooted. recognizing that the path forward seems to be marked with even more suffering and pain. But until then, we will continue to pray, to believe, and to keep believing and hoping. I kept saying in this war, we need to fight to keep the faith. They can take everything from us. They cannot get inside of us and take faith from within us. So we must fight to keep this faith. This concept of sumud is thankfully so present in the Bible. I see it in the conclusion of the book of Habakkuk, a book of lament, of frustration. And in the end of it, he declared in defiance in sumud, and I quote, "Though the fig tree does not blossom, and no fruit is on the vines, though the produce of the olive fails, and the fields yield no food, though the flock is cut off from the fold, and there is no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will exult in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength." This is a statement of sumud, even defiance. And I can actually imagine the pain in uttering such a statement in a time of despair. But this is a choice. He chose to speak this affirmation contrary to his feelings, even contrary to reality. That's why we cannot give in on our faith. I feel that Jesus pushed us toward a similar concept in the story of the parable of the widow who was pleading for justice. I just spoke about it. There was this widow who relentlessly petitioned an unjust God to grant her justice. According to Jesus, the just was or had, and I quote, "no fear of God and no respect for anyone." I'm in DC, very relevant. This judge refused the widow's request for a while, but finally gave up and granted her justice because the widow kept, and I quote, "bothering him." I love how Jesus here invites us to bother him, to bother God. This is sumud, this is resilience, this is defiance, because when you give in on faith, you give in on everything. And the parable concludes with these words, "And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. But when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" It's faith that we cannot lose, so that we will live to see the day in our sumud in which justice will be granted. And believe me, justice will be granted. It must be granted, and it will be granted. This is our faith. And in our sumud and resilience, we keep on. Sumud is our commitment. It's our defiance and resolve. It's our commitment to continue to work for justice, to advocate for life with dignity, and to choose to hope that we will recover from this atrocity. Yes, I acknowledge, we know that the loss is enormous, the destruction is massive, the pain is profound, and the wounds are so deep, to the extent that recovery seems an illusion. Feels like the bottom of a deep and dark pit. It feels like the tomb of Jesus on Saturday, with death, darkness, and silence. But we choose to hope, to survive, to exist, and to insist that God is good. So I say again, we will recover. And rooted in resilience, we will demand justice for our people. We will recover. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac. So just two quick announcements. Unfortunately, we sold out of the books, but they are available online. So Erdman's, the publisher, and other places where you buy books online, you can find it. We also do have a sign-in sheet back there with Churches for Middle East Peace. So if you're not on our list already, please feel free to sign up so you can know about these events in the future as well. So we're really honored to move into the respondent conversation time of our evening together. So the first respondent will be Albert Mohaiber. Albert is an attorney in the Washington, D.C. area with extensive background in immigration, government affairs, political consulting, and public relations. He's also one of the founders of a new organization called Orthodox Christians for Palestine, which is trying to mobilize more engagement and awareness and advocacy within the Orthodox Christian community here in DC, but also throughout the country. So we're really grateful that Albert is with us this evening and will offer some remarks in response to Munther's talk.
I'm a little short, so let me pull this down. A hard act to follow, right? I've never been a respondent, so I'm not quite sure what I can and cannot do. But they said, look, just talk about your experience and respond to what Reverend Munther had to say. And boy, did he have a lot to say. Let's give him another round of applause. We started the Orthodox Christians for Palestine as a movement. It's not an organization. Our purpose is to educate our own community first. Because believe it or not, many of the Orthodox, including the Arab Orthodox, don't really know all these issues and the nuances. My family came here in 2004, but that was 1904. So you can imagine, by the fourth, fifth generation, if you're not on top of it, people lose touch. And they somehow understand the situation as it's presented to them in the media and in school books, which is nothing like what Father Isaac had to say, which is the truth. Once we educate ourselves, we hope to educate our friends, our neighbors, then we hope to mobilize them and activate. So that when CMEP has an event, please go there. If JVC has an event, please go there. And hopefully, the numbers will increase day by day, not only in our parish here, but nationwide. And if anybody wants to learn more about it, Rula Khoury is here, and Salim Aboud and others, be happy to reach out so that we can activate and reach each and every other parish that is represented here today. But with my hat as an attorney, I'm getting calls all the time. People are afraid. And at first I said, what do you have to be afraid of? You're in America. You have a First Amendment right to say these things. In fact, it's your duty to speak truth to power, isn't it? What is happening? I lose sleep at night worrying about friends, relatives, clients, good Americans, and others who want to speak the truth. I don't know if it was a dream or if I really got this call from an older person concerned about his 32-year-old son. Why? He was worried that maybe his visa would get revoked since he spoke out for peace, justice, love. He opposed genocide. He was a part of a group that advocated these values. He paid visit to some of the imprisoned. He was doing the same. He helped the poor, homeless, including refugees. Would he be eligible for a visa in the future? Whether it be a visitor visa, student visa, or even a religious visa. We have religious visas, by the way. Would the new vetting process find him ineligible or worse, undesirable or a terrorist? By the way, he's Jewish, this kid. Would that help and keep him safe? Now, many of you probably know the father and son, but because of lawyer-client privilege, I can't reveal their name, but I can give you initials: G.O.D. and J.C. So what Father Munther says, the way he says it, it's both encouraging for all of us, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, whether you believe or not. And it gives us, I think, a sense that it is coming from above. Thank you. This came from above, too. And it gives us the courage. He spoke about a lot of things that 6 months ago we wouldn't have had to worry about. But today, we're extremely worried about. But I think the faith issue is one that should encourage us and encourage others to continue to do the right thing. Because what do we tell our children or our grandchildren in 30, 40, 50 years? What did you do at that time? Well, as somebody said, you're doing it right now. Whether it's something or nothing, that's what you're doing. The call for righteousness, international law, morality, things I was taught in law school, things I teach not in law school, but at lectures and to up-and-coming lawyers, they have to be reinforced as well. Father asks, will we recover? We have to recover. When I was a kid, we had segregation. That's how old I am. And even though I grew up on the northern border, it wasn't until 1968 that my parents were brave enough to put me on a bus to a then all-black school. Think about that. We're in the very, very northern part of America, where the N-word was spoken, unfortunately, more commonly than it is here in the South. So Martin Luther King was a hero for all of us at that time. We didn't think it would ever end, but it did, because we organized, we educated, we mobilized, grassroots. Fast forward several years, I come to Washington. I worked for former Senator, U.S. Senator James Rubble, the first Arab senator in the United States. We had apartheid, not just in Palestine, but originally in South Africa. 1987, Thanksgiving, we get a call from the Congressional Black Caucus. He and I went. We were the only two non-African Americans in the room. And we put out a plan how we could start working together, mobilizing, educating against apartheid. We had a BDS movement at that time, if you are old enough to remember. And Jim was one of the first former senators, first lawyer to be arrested in front of the embassy of South Africa, just simply for protesting. Ring a bell? U.S. senator going to jail because he was speaking power, truth to power. But it took time, and we overcame. A few years later, we were involved in a Supreme Court case that said that Arab Americans should be entitled to the protection of the Civil Rights Act. Well, guess what? That professor, an Iraqi American, was being denied tenure, but also, in another section, a Jewish temple was desecrated by neo-Nazis. We were winning on our way up. Unfortunately, they were losing. So we filed an amicus brief in both cases, saying that both Arabs and Jews should be entitled to protections under the Civil Rights Act. We argued at 10, they argued at 11. A few months later, I was driving in my hometown, before the internet, before iPhones, because I heard on the radio, and I pulled over, and I was ecstatic but in tears, a 9-0 decision in both cases. Arab Americans, Jewish Americans working together. So what seems impossible with faith that Father Isaac told us about can certainly be done if we do it together. It's a grassroots effort. There's so many issues he raised, and I don't have a lot of time to go over all of them, but Let me just touch on a few. Christianity, equal nonviolence. Should be a no-brainer. But I remember during the early 80s, I worked on the Jesse Jackson presidential campaign. I was the Arab stripe of the Rainbow Coalition. I gave a talk at a church, and a couple of women came up after and said, "Oh, that's fascinating. We really enjoyed your talk, but Arab Christian? When did your family convert?" I said, I think it was about 32. Right? Isn't that about time? 32? But that's our fault because we didn't educate enough. We didn't mobilize enough. We didn't activate enough. I am so pleased to see all of you here in this church on a somewhat cold spring night, knowing it's going to be 80 degrees tomorrow, and that you went from the White House here to join this amazing, articulate, faithful, most importantly, brave preacher. Because we all owe it, not only to him, but every child in Palestine, be they Christian, be they Muslim, be they Jewish, be they anything, to do this together, to not lose that faith, and to continue forward. And there's two things you can do in the meantime. One, support groups like CMEP and all the other progressive groups here, JVP and the others. I've got a full disclosure. My daughter works for UNRWA USA. Support UNRWA. Because I think this is what Jesus would do. And I think the whole concept of Samud and working together for these goals is not only the least we can do, but it's the most important thing we have to do to end this genocide and bring peace to the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Albert. And I would encourage those of you who are maybe in other denominational groups to talk with Albert about ways that you can work with this Orthodox Christians for Palestine. We also have Rubble here, who is part of their group as well, in the spirit of ecumenical work. So next, I have the pleasure of introducing the Executive Director of Churches for Middle East Peace, Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Reverend Dr. Cannon, in addition to serving as the executive director of the organization, is an ordained pastor in the Evangelical Covenant Church. She has held several senior positions on advocacy and outreach with a number of organizations, including World Vision and Compassion International, and is, I think many of you know, a very tireless advocate for justice and has shepherded our organization through these past challenging years. So we're grateful for May and her leadership, and welcome her up.
I didn't realize that was such a long way to walk. Sorry. How does one respond to a message like that, which was brought by Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac? And I'm grateful also for the words of Albert. Thank you. And I agree wholeheartedly that all of us have a role to play. So welcome to our Jewish and Muslim brothers and sisters. This is a holy time for many of us. Eid Mubarak and Passover will be on the horizon as well, and it's Lent for those of us who are Christian. And so I'm grateful for the solidarity that we have and being able to come together. Some of the words I'll share tonight are spoken to the Christian community, in large part because I believe the Christian community is among those that are the most culpable in this moment, but it is also because that's the tradition that I'm from. Today marks 544 days And I know that it didn't begin 544 days ago. But every day for 544 days, Palestinian children have been killed. And I don't know if you know that in the last 24 hours, more than 70 Palestinians were killed in Gaza. And it continues every single day. "544 days. Any other place in the world, and the news would be up in arms. A dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen children, or people, men and women. But when they're Palestinians, the world is silent. And here in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, we are not only culpable, we're participatory, and we're guilty. And I don't have any words to say except for the fact that we failed the Palestinian people. And that the Palestinian people are beautiful and born in the image of God. And that they have so much to teach us. And so I'm so grateful for the words and the courage of Reverend Dr. Munther Isaac, who's a dear friend. I'm grateful for his courage, but may we be motivated by that we haven't even really begun. That our efforts, we say that the world is standing with Palestine, and yet each and every day, children are still dying. And we're now going on a month where food and water is still not being allowed into the enclave. And still, children are starving. I have a new grandson who is about 10 weeks old, and I thought I knew what love was until I held him. And when he's hungry, he has this kind of cry. And I thought to myself, what I wouldn't do for this child. And every time I hear him cry, I think about the children in Gaza. One of my mentors was Dr. Maadi of Passia, a Palestinian Christian think tank, and he says, if the truth is not spoken, the truth will be lost. And for some reason, here in the US, the truth is not being heard. It's like we're deaf to hearing the truth about what's happening. And I feel like we're shouting it from the rooftops, and yet it's not breaking through. Under the Biden administration, we kept having protests, and they kept saying, Christians aren't calling for a ceasefire. And we were like, look out your window. And they kept saying, we're not getting any phone calls. And we kept calling and calling and calling, or we kept sending letters and letters and letters. I'm sure they were throwing them away. And so there's so much more that we have to do. Nehemiah, in the scriptures, gave us a model of what I think we also need to do. Nehemiah was not guilty of the sins of the people of God, but he confessed the sins anyway. And I think that's a part of what we also need to do, that we need to take responsibility for the guilt of our nation. And I think that's a place where we need to start. If there's anything that I'm convicted of, it's just that we have just failed. Each and every day. I'm sorry that's not a hopeful message. And yet, God has not failed us. I hear Palestinian Christians saying that they don't question where God is in this conflict, not conflict, ethnic cleansing, genocide. They don't question where God is. They question where the church is. And so the very witness of the gospel is at stake. What kind of good news is it? What kind of good news is it if it is not in the most broken places of the world? Children in Gaza, they would say of Americans, the Christian nation that America is, what are Americans going to give us today from the sky? Is it bread or is it bombs? I hope soon they'll have a different answer. And yet 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4 through 6 says this, "Therefore, through God's mercy, we have this ministry. We do not lose heart." We mustn't lose heart. One of the things I say often is despair is the luxury of the privileged. We have the privilege of not paying attention, of turning on our water and letting it run. I live in a house that was built right after Lincoln was assassinated. And do you know how long it takes to get the water hot? Munther knows, he's staying there. And every time I run that water, I think, the water that runs to get hot in my house is more water than a Palestinian in Gaza has in a month. Literally. Shame. 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 The scriptures say, "Let light shine out of darkness." He made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. Light can't shine in darkness unless you call darkness what it is. Darkness is evil. Killing Palestinian children in Gaza is evil. And we have to call it what it is. It is evil, and it is not of God. Friends, I believe in a liberative gospel. I believe that, and I'm sorry, I wanted to welcome all faiths and all traditions. As a follower of Jesus, I believe in the saving power of Christ. And I believe that it's a saving power that is of the soul and also of the body. It's a message of justice and righteousness. It's a message that calls for liberation. When I hear messages like Nelson Mandela saying, "Until Palestinians are free, none of us are free," I hear the message of Christ. If that message can't be spoken in Gaza, it can't be spoken anywhere. What kind of gospel is this if it is not good news for the world? If it is not good news, it has to be good news for the most broken places of the world. And Gaza right now is the most broken place in the world. It's so incredibly broken, and we are the ones that are breaking it day after day after day after day. And so my cry and my plea is don't give up. And sometimes it means don't sleep. My husband says sleep. I think it's okay if we don't sleep. May God give us strength. Munther, don't give up. Don't give up, Munther. And I say that about your children too. We want Munther's children to live in Palestine. We want there to be Christians in Palestine. We want there to be Muslims in Palestine, right? We want there to be Jews in Israel. I mean, we want there to be peace and justice and an end to occupation and an end to the atrocities and the genocide. This is when I say, "Come, Lord Jesus." But may we no longer be complicit. May we own that which is ours to own. Psalm 13 says, "How long, Lord, will you forget us forever? How long will you hide our face from us? How long must we wrestle with our thoughts and day after day have sorrow in our hearts? How long will our enemies triumph over us?" I don't believe that there are good people and bad people in terms of, these false theologies of one people group being good and one people group being evil. I think that's bad theology. But I do believe in light and darkness. And in the question of how long must we wait? I don't know how long it will be until justice comes. But however long it takes, may we not give up hope. May we not give up standing in solidarity and community alongside one another and alongside the Palestinian people in their quest for liberation and justice. May it be so, in the name of Christ. Amen.
Thank you to both of our respondents. We are nearing the end of our program this evening. So again, can you please join me in a round of appreciation for Reverend Dr. Isaac. So we want to end our time together with some prayer. So as I said at the start, we're grateful for the co-sponsors of this organization, including Telos, and so I now will invite up to conclude us in prayer David Kataba, who is the Director of Communications and Christian Engagement at the Telos Group here in Washington, D.C. As an American of Syrian descent, he is passionate about the transformative potential of Christians participating in peacemaking around the globe. And so we're grateful for Telos and their partnership. And David, please join us.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you to CMEP and all of the partnering organizations, May and Albert, for your remarks, and of course, Reverend Dr. Isaac, for your courageous, tireless truth-telling and leadership, and may God uphold you with samud and unrelenting love. Let us pray. God of all, God who is our breath, we breathe you in. We breathe in your Spirit. We breathe you in, Spirit, the same Spirit who hovered over the waters, separating order from chaos. Spirit of order, chaos has come to usurp you, has sought to dethrone you. Destruction sings its war song. Supremacy and annihilation declare their victories. Gaza is in ruins, and God, we are undone. Your people weep. The cries of your children echo in the rubble, settle in the heavens, and pierce our hearts. God, you made us out of dust. We are so fragile. We feel powerless to evil. Your children in Gaza and across Palestine are being exiled from their homes, from their very bodies, from this very earth. They have been dispossessed and discarded. And your church, Jesus, looks on stupefied. It looks on to mock, looks on even to congratulate and condone this day of death. Why has your church become a sanctuary for evil over a refuge of compassion? A celebration of supremacy over a protest song of love, a garbage heap of vainglory over a garden of glorious liberation. How could we have sanctioned such deafening silence? Why must we allow the powerful to terrorize the bearers of your divine image, who reflect your glorious face? God, in the midst of our anger, we find you in the rubble. You speak with a roaring voice of power that you have not abandoned your people, that you lie suffocating beside every Palestinian child, mother, father, sibling, friend, that though they are exiled today, betrayed and abandoned, they will one day inherit the earth. that the home of belonging you are building is beyond our very imagination, beyond our very capacity to even ask for. That this home belongs to the disinherited, the crushed under the rubble, the ethnically cleansed, the victims of genocide. You are a God of life. God, cleanse our hearts. Uproot the lie that says our freedom is only possible through domination. Release us from the bondage of our inhumanity when we participate in violence and sit in the comfortable extraction of empire. Liberate us from our self-reliance into the wonder of our mutuality and generosity. God, we repent. We repent of our silence and our fear in the face of evil, heresy, and injustice. Forgive us, gracious Lord. Build us back up. Transform our minds. Empower us with the same Spirit who raised Christ from the dead to be a people of resurrection. Send us out into devastation to use our hands to heal. Send us out into the war zones of body and spirit to interrupt evil. Send us out into the halls of power in this very city to dethrone the false prophets and idols who spit on your face even though they use your name. You tell us, despite it all, that you see and you know. And you say, take heart, for you have overcome the world. Overcome the powers of this world, Lord. Resurrect Gaza. Resurrect your church into true discipleship. Return and repair. Institute justice and truth. Unveil the new and send us out to be the new, to bear the hope of your nonviolent, just kingdom of peace into every edge of this earth. In your name, which is a name of power, of truth, of justice, of hope, a name which goes with us wherever we go, may it be so. Amen. Friends, go in peace.